So now I'm gonna talk about how I found the incel community. So when I when I was very young, I didn't really care much at all about politics or how society, worked and stuff like that. I was just someone who I was just this good boy who did what I was supposed to do, like in school and stuff like that. Even though I guess I consider myself as a social democrat, because this whole thing with the social democrats was very much in my family. So therefore I considered myself as that, I guess, even though I never I never agreed upon their views on feminism or immigration. That was something I never agreed upon. But when it came to the whole leftist idea of having a good welfare and taking care of the people who are not that fortunate, that was something I liked. So yeah, therefore I thought it was a good idea to consider myself as that. And when I was a kid, I mostly just hanged out with girls. I just had my friends were girls. So I always had to suffer with the awareness that it would eventually end. I could see just by looking out in reality that it wasn't normal for a guy to be friends with girls like this. And especially not when you got older. So yeah, I knew I would be left alone, right? Very much expected it. And of course it happened. When I was 13, when I hit the puberty age. When we hit the puberty age, I was just left alone. And yeah, from that point on, I've been alone. But I still tried hard in school, tried to do well here. I was someone who was never, I didn't had any anger towards people or towards society. I I wasn't like an enemy to anyone. I was just someone who did what I was supposed to do. I did well in school. I tried to do well in school. That was my ambition. That was what I wanted to do. And so that's how it was. But here I could see when we had reached this age, I could still see how the girls in my school were treated much better than me, so much better. Like they had all these guys who flooded them with attention, validation, and of course, they had access to the sexual, and I did not. And I had to suffer with with the knowledge that I would likely never have access to this. I would just keep on being a virgin without a partner or anything for a very long time. There was nothing that suggested I would get it anytime soon. And this brought so much pain for me. And then in high school, it became a lot worse. Here, things were terrible for me because I just, yeah, before we had this classroom where you could be, where I could sort of hide. I could just be in our classroom and just sit there during recess and all of that. So I had somewhere to be where I could be sort of hidden. But now we didn't have that. We didn't have a special classroom or anything like that. So now I was just forced to be around this terrible social environment while being all alone. And being in such a social environment that isn't school and not participating in it yourself is horrible. It was torture for me. And so, so it was terrible. I tried to hide as much as I could, like in the library and stuff like that. But it was very difficult. And I had to witness how other people had it much better than me. I had to constantly just listen to it. Listen to these people talking about how much showing themselves off and talk about how much better they had it compared to me. And of course, the girls were just flooded by attention and validation. They had it so good. They were so beloved by people and by the teachers. And of course, they had access to the sexual stuff. And yeah, they had it so good. But I, as a man, was still a virgin. There was still nothing that suggested that I would get any of that, in any time soon. And that made me feel terribly. It just felt worse and worse the older I got. So at this point, I could really see that was something wrong going on, that women had unfair privileges. They had it so much better just because they were women. They were treated much better by people and they had it so good. And of course, this better life made it easier for them to succeed in school and to succeed just in life in general. But I, as a man, had it terribly. I didn't have access to this, and it was so obvious that women had better access to the sexual stuff. But I didn't exactly know how it all worked, why this was the case. And I had this false idea that, yeah, it is easier for them, but still, men has as much sex, right? It's as many men as women who have sex, and it's not like unfair in this regard, right? Because it's like an even amount of men and women, and they have sex just one and one, so that it has to be evenly distributed, right? Yeah, this false idea I had back then. So I didn't understand the depth of it, how the extent of this privilege yet. But I could see that something was wrong. Yeah, and then, of course, in 2014, when I was just about to graduate high school, Elliot Rodger happened. And here, yeah, I didn't support it what he did, but this whole thing of being able to see how there seemed to really be other men out there having this very big issues with not being able to get the sexual stuff and being alone. And yeah, I became interested in him, and I saw his videos and read a bit of his manifesto, and yeah. And I don't know exactly when I first heard the term incel, but I guess it was around this time when this whole thing with Elliot Rodger happened. I can see that even more now that there was a sexual injustice for men. But there were men like this who were alone while women lived in luxury in this field. But I still didn't quite know why. But I had this will to find out about it more. So then I bumped into this guy, Ström, which is this guy from Sweden who is he was really ahead of his time. He he started criticizing feminism, you know, very early on, like before like no one else did it, like in the early 2010s, around there he started doing it. And yeah, I listened to him, his criticism of feminism, and I also read one of his books where he talked about this injustices that exists for men. uh, yeah, he talked a lot about how the like structures in society and how that affects, how that causes injustices for men, but it didn't talk much about the sexual injustices. Yeah, it was something about, it talked a bit about, you know, the surplus of men, that there is a surplus of men, and this causes injustice on the sexual market. And yeah, so at this point I understood that it wasn't evenly distributed of men and women. No, there was more men than women in the younger ages. So yeah, I knew that now. So I could see that the sexual market was unfair to some degree now because of this. This could be an explanation for why women had it so much better sexually. So yeah, I had that now. But still I didn't know to a full extent how, you know, how the unfair it was. And I still thought that maybe there was a chance for me to succeed in life despite being a man. You know, it's not that unfair. So therefore I still kept on trying, and I started studying. I traveled, like I moved to Stockholm to study physics engineering at KTH, the Royal Institute of Technology. And this was around the time where the great migrant crisis happened. And I was there at the central station in Stockholm and witnessed this. How the whole place was just filled with immigrants, male immigrants. And I thought this was terrible. Like, it was terrible how this caused a massive surplus of men. It wasn't fair that these men came here and took the women here, while Swedish men like me were left out. It shouldn't be like that. So this is something that really caused me to be really against immigration. I mean, I guess you could say I became red pilled around this point. I became against immigration, I became more conservative. Yeah, and then 2016 came. And yeah, that was an amazing year. I mean, it was just this thing. It was the personal things with me. I was studying and it was going relatively good here. I still had hope for myself and that I would be able to have a good career and maybe find a partner and stuff like that eventually. And then there was also this thing in the world, that was happening in the world, that I thought was good. That, I mean, first there was Brexit, which I liked. That was a victory for the whole conservatism and anti-politically correctness and all, like against these things. And then of course there was Donald Trump winning, becoming the president in the United States. That was a massive hit towards immigration, feminism, politically correctness, which I really liked. So yeah, with all these changes happening, I thought, yeah, maybe there's some hope for the world. That these things that I didn't like was just fought against. And there was also other people, of course, around this time that I followed, you know, like Miley Yiannopoulos and Alex Jones, these kinds of people. So yeah, I guess I could consider myself as being like this red-pilled conservative person at this point. However, things were not going so well for me. Eventually, in my life, it got terribly. I lived under horrible conditions in my life that prevented me from studying, and eventually I had to leave my studies. After the third year, I couldn't continue doing my master's, so I just had to leave, and this was terrible. At this point, I was just, yeah, I thought like, yeah, my life was very dark, and my view on things, my view on my life was very dark. I didn't have much hope at all. It was really terrible. But I still had some kind of hope that things would get better. So at this point, I started to look into male self-help stuff. I started looking at Jordan Peterson, and I even read his book, 12 Rules for Life. Yeah, but of course, that didn't help. My life was still terrible, but eventually I bumped into this video on YouTube from Alexander Grace called "This is Why Men Have Less Sex Than Women." And this video was about this chart that shows how it's a much greater percentage for men than women for young men than young women who say that they haven't had any sex over the last year. And yeah, this is something that really made me realize how unfair the system was in this, that the system was rigged against men. That women have it so much better. They actually have, more women than men have sex. And it's very unfair, and it's not evenly distributed. Yeah, it's first there's the surplus of men, but then there's also that some men are taking a massive share of the women and the sex at the cost of other men being left out, not being able to get anything. And yeah, I guess this was something that started my journey to become black-pilled. And then I guess through this video I was just recommended lots of other types of videos related to this, related to injustices for men in sex and dating. And eventually I came into real incel content from people like Face and LMS, Incel TV, Blue Skies Media, Todd, Decline, and these people. And yeah, I really got into the whole incel community. Now I started getting into it. And eventually I started reading lots of stuff on Incel Wiki, and then I got into the forum incels.is that it's called now. And yeah, at this point I realized that the system is extremely rigged against men. And it's about the sexual. That's what it comes down to. The sexual injustices. That's what it's about. We live in a matriarchy where women's sexual advantages gives them advantages everywhere, pretty much. It makes them get so much better lives. It makes them get so much better treatment by people. And this is just something that makes it so much easier for them to succeed in school and just succeed in like all aspects of life. This is what it was about. I had been wrong before when I was, I guess, red-pilled, just conservative, and looked at all these people. I realized now that these people were not completely correct because they didn't talk about this issue, this sexual issue, these sexual injustices. Now they just seem to be guys who had it good sexually, so I guess they didn't care about it because of that. And yeah, of course the women didn't care about it. They didn't do anything to promote any sexual justice, this very basic issues that you should do something about. They didn't seem to have any interest in this. So therefore they were very wrong. And then these self-help people were also wrong because they only talked about internal stuff, how to self-improve, how to improve just yourself. And they didn't talk about the external issues, the massive sexual injustices that existed. They should really do something about as well. But now, when I had gone into the incel community, I realized that it was about the sexual. And it was just because I was a man instead of a woman that my life was so terrible. It's just because of that I wasn't able to get a successful career or anything, not being able to get a partner, not being able to get sex or anything. And I just started to imagine how wonderful my life would have been if I would have just been a woman instead. I mean, then I would have probably just been seen as a wonderful, good girl already when I was a kid. I would have been able to have friends that, like the girls that I was friends with, I would have been able to maintain my friends that were girls because I was a girl myself. And then of course when puberty came, I started to get interested in the sexual stuff. I could have felt so good knowing that I would definitely be able to get these things. I would definitely be able to get sex and have a partner and get a family and all this. I could have felt so good knowing this. And this would have helped me so much to succeed. And of course, the guys would have simped for me and they would have treated me wonderfully, flooded me with attention, validation. And I would have been treated like a queen. Had it so good, had all these social connections. I would have gotten all this help and support that I needed from them. So I would have easily been able to succeed in school, and in high school I would have been able to succeed very easily. I would have had it wonderful here. I would have had lots of friends. I would have been able to just have I would have been able to have a partner. I would have been able to lose my virginity at a young age. And I wouldn't have had to suffer by the awareness of me being a virgin, not being able to experience these things that other people experienced. I wouldn't have had to feel bad about that. I would have just been able to feel so good by being able to experience these wonderful sexual things. And then I would have been able to get into a top university, have a top education, And there I would have probably met the person I would have eventually married, and I could have just easily been able to get a nice, bigger apartment that I could have shared with my partner. I could have easily afforded it by sharing the rent. I could have had this nice big place where, great furnitures and stuff, and a, just a wonderful place to study that could make me study easily, and I could have just had all this support from my partner, and I would have been able to charge my batteries by regularly having sex with a partner and just have it wonderfully, and just being treated so much, being treated wonderfully by the people at the university, and everything would have just gone so smooth and so nice, and I would have been able to go through the education very easily and wonderfully. And then after that, I would have been able to get a top job and have, very, very high income and make a lot of money. And I would have just moved into a nice big house with my partner, and we would have married and had kids. And here, at a young age, I would have had all these things that is the base for a wonderful life. A career, a partner, kids, a nice environment to live in. It would have been so great if I was just a woman instead of a man. But just because I was a man, just because I didn't have these sexual and social privileges that the women had, I was now here with nothing. I had nothing for a long time. I was just there having nothing. I was just wandering around. I was just walking around and feeling very sad. And then eventually I just was there with nothing, basically. I couldn't finish my education. I didn't have a job. I didn't have money. I didn't have a place to live. I was at my mom's place, and I just decided that, this life is so terrible. I decided to rope. But just before I was able to do that, I was put in a psych ward. And I was there for 2 months. And then after that, I was able to get neat bucks, and I got a place to live. So I was able to survive now, at least. And I appreciate that, because now I've been able to, I've used this time to write a manifesto, or like an autobiography / manifesto. I just try to describe my life and how it ended up like this, and my views on society and how it should be. And and then I'm also making these videos to sort of document stuff and try to explain my life and my views on things. But I'm here, a lonely virgin, neat, with just having a terrible life, and this, basically, that's what I do now. I'm just here trying to explain things, explain how it ended up like this, and how the society is, how terrible things are. That's what I'm doing now. That's how I went from being a leftist social democrat to a conservative who found the incel community. And he's a very sad, lonely virgin with basically nothing. A neat. I would have liked to go back to my studies and finish that and try to have a career and all that. But I'm so locked. I feel so locked in this situation I am now. I can't see how things could go well for me. Yeah. So what I can do now is to just be here and try to explain my situation and how it ended up like this and how society is, how it is wrong.